Hello, I am under the water. Water is a very important theme in Sekiro. You start the game in a well, you learn to swim, your healing item is a gourd of medicinal water, and this one is really important. Pop 3 green balloons in front of Grandma? Why would I do that? Do you want me? Why? Why would I know that I need to pop 3 green balloons in front of older women? Okay, in defense of the game, she is praying in front of water, and if you read the item description for the green balloon, it does say the Ashina consider the Fountainhead water itself to be worthy of worship. Ah, the sound of water. Doesn't it make you want to just fall asleep? It makes me want to pee. No, it makes you want to sleep. I am now going to lull you to sleep. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. Manta Sleep provides comfortable premium sleep masks so you can sleep better, anywhere, anytime. They offer a variety of mask designs, but my favourite is the sound mask. Inside this ventilated strap are razor-thin, adjustable Bluetooth headphones that allow you to drift off, listening to your sleep aid of choice. And if you're a side sleeper like me, there's no discomfort or digging into your face when lying in this position. With these C-shaped eye cups, you can adjust them for a personal fit with no pressure on your eyeballs. Whether you're trying to get your mandated 8 hours or desperately cram in a nap where you can, these masks can help you get the perfect blackout seal. And Manta Sleep is part of the pro-nap movement, empowering you to get the proper sleep you deserve so you can go on to do great stuff. So if you want to sleep good, check out Manta Sleep here for 10% off site-wide using my code Chalice. Thanks, Manta Sleep. One of the most important places connected to water in Sekiro is Mibu Village, the place where filling water balloons was invented. There are many different types and colours to signify blessings of wealth, sympathy, fortune, good upbringing, and peace for the departed. Mibu means aquatic life, or life born of the water, and the water used inside the balloons is from a place called the Fountainhead Palace, somewhere revered and worshipped. For reference, here is a map of Sekiro's world. Up here is the Fountainhead, and down here is Mibu Village, quite far in distance, but they are directly connected via water. And they're also connected via tradition. The first time you can access the Fountainhead is after taking part in a wedding procession at Mibu Village. You get transported in quite an unconventional way. How it would have gone for a normal couple would be to arrive at the palace and be greeted with a cup filled with divine waters, a drink popular with the nobles of the palace. Now there is quite a juxtaposition in the lives of those who dwell at the humble watermill versus those at quite the literal top of the world. The Mibu villagers appeared to be farmers, fishermen, hollow, sick and hungry. They toil in fertile lands and have no choice but to fill their bellies with water to keep them full. A chance to go to the Fountainhead meant a chance to experience luxury, to taste the nectar of the palace nobles. Who wouldn't want an opportunity to drink to their heart's content? One such person is the village's head priest, a man who simply cannot stop drinking. Nothing will quench his thirst, not the river water, not sake, only that special drink from up top will sate him. Oh, he's going to town! He gurgles inanely about becoming a citizen of the palace, inviting all of his village folk to join him in drinking too, so that they shall all be accepted. He's clearly not in his right mind. In fact, the entire village appears to be in a state of delirium. The only one with a shred of sanity left is this basket-wearing NPC. Shosuke recounts that the head priest had treated them all to some sake. You get the exact sake in question later, a top-shelf drink brewed by the Ashina brewmaster with water from the dragon spring. There are no words that can do the flavour justice. To understand, one must taste it for themselves. After drinking, he remembers feeling a bit thirsty. No matter, they'll just drink some more. And more. And more. And when there was no more sake, they resorted to scooping water from the ponds and the lakes into their mouths. But even that would not stave off the thirst they felt.
And before Shosuke knew it, everyone in the village had gone mad. The only reason he was spared was because he vomited up what he had consumed, clearing his head enough to be able to divulge this information to us. But that would not last. Later, he too could not resist drinking. He too turned insane from the thirst and what he drank as a result. Something is wrong with the water. You see, as a part of the wedding procession to reach the fountainhead, you need a shelter stone, something that will appear in the bodies of those who have long drank from the fountainhead waters. A fragrant, auspicious stone. They're pretty large in scale and, based on the description, read like a calcified deposit that has formed from prolonged exposure to this type of water. Pathological mineralization. This is an educational channel. Anyway, when you give the head priest that special water he so badly craves, something quite weird happens after he drinks it. His body morphs, growing 4 arms and a tail as he mutates into this translucent creature. It flails pitifully in front of you. This creature type is what makes up a significant part of the population in the Fountainhead Palace currently. These are palace nobles. Whether the head priest knew he would become one of these things is not clear, but what is clear is that the closer to the source the water is from, the more potent its effects are. Drinking the water in Mibu Village over some period of time appears to have diminishing effects on one's mental state, versus the water that comes from the very top. Simply imbibing it was enough to push the priest into full fish mode. And the reason we know that this creature is some kind of fish is because when you put the priest down, he drops fish scales, specifically the same kind of scales you collect from treasure carps in the game. Now, these special fish scales only drop from carps, can be found in the water, or are in possession of fish connoisseurs. And funnily enough, fish, specifically a great coloured carp, is something to worship in the palace. There is an absolutely massive koi in the lake that will attack you should you swim into its lair. However, if you ring this special feeding time bell, it triggers a Pavlovian response, causing the fish to rise to the surface and await some food, after which it will become non-hostile. Fish are friends. Now, this great carp has quite an insane quest line behind it with a few twists, and it had me overthinking everything and not trusting a word that anyone said.
Oh my god! That has to be connected. There is no way. That is so incredibly relevant.
I do have the VOD on my second channel if you want to see my brain in real time, but for brevity, let's talk about what's important for this video. The carp has a loyal attendant, and he's a pretty nice guy, but as you may have noticed, he also looks a bit fishy himself, a slightly taller and stockier version of the palace noble character model. You eventually meet his 2 daughters, who both have quite a vendetta against the palace's inhabitants. The first tells you that when their father became a noble, he was instantly entranced by the carp. All he could do was feed it more and more. She asks that you release him from this eternal servitude, as this is something he would have never have wanted. And she also gives you this tasty lore tidbit that the palace nobles have a craving for the vitality of youth. This is shown by their enfeebling attacks. They sap your life force away from you and into their own bodies. They are obsessed with immortality. The second daughter solidifies that, attacking the palace nobles, screaming that they tricked her father, nobility this and eternity that. To me, this makes it clear that the palace projected a false image of the lifestyle it offered, which is supported by that head priest in Mibu Village who so badly wanted to become a citizen of the palace, but in reality all that meant was to become a mindless, fishy husk of who you once were. So back to the great carp. As you're feeding it the masturbate, a delicious diet of what looks like slimy slugs, there's another character who's also taken an interest in the carp, a pot noble. I keep wanting to say pot noodle. As you can imagine, it's basically a palace noble inside a pot. They say, hey, would you give that carp some of my special bait? And it's a nice suspicious shade of green, now with the addition of hair in it. Now, there are actually 2 pot nobles who will both give you their weird bait and both tell you to give it to the carp. The pot noble inside the palace actually badmouths the other one, telling you not to believe a word that he says, and that he actually tried to kill the carp before for his own gain, hence his banishment. The other pot noble doesn't really say anything in his defence, he just mutters on and on that he really wants to become a carp. Because carps live long, long lives. Once again, we're hearing about that obsession with living a long life. I agonised for a long time about whether to give the carp this bait, because clearly something very fishy was going on here. I hate that I made that pun. Moving on.
But does any of this matter? Oh no, oh my god, what have I done? Oh god.
It doesn't matter whose bait you give, the great carp dies upon eating it, and then when you reload, would you look at that?
Right, give me... Oh. Oh? Wait, he became the carp! How is that possible?
They have now become a fish, succeeding the previous one to become the new great carp, at least in theory. This would imply that the carp we saw before was presumably a person at one point. This is supported by the fact that the carp has very square, human-like teeth that look very similar to those of the palace nobles, and they also share the same catfish-like whiskers. So presumably this new carp will follow in its predecessor's footsteps, getting fat and living in the mysterious palace waters forever. As a side note, if you dive under the water in this section, you can actually see what looks like the giant bones of a deceased carp. Now, this was actually here from the beginning. It's not the carp you murdered. You actually find their still intact body washed downstream in the Sunken Valley, confirming the flow and route of the water. But what's interesting about the carp skeleton is that it appears to be infested with what looks like glowing green blobs. It's not explained what these are exactly, but in my opinion, the fact that they are only around the carp skeleton and nowhere else in the game, and the fact that the killer bait was green, implies that these are linked to the cause of death. They do kind of look a bit like a bioluminescent worm. There are such things as bone-eating worms as well. This could also be linked to the centipede theory, which I'll briefly touch on more later, but what's important to remember here is that the water in the palace flows down into the valley and any connecting rivers, so anything that dies or is put into the water at the top will be inadvertently consumed by those unknowingly along the line. That's actually a survival tip in real life. You never drink water downstream if you can help it. Anyway, something I want to talk about now is red eyes. The pot noble you helped to become a carp has something unique about it. Red glowing eyes. In this game, red eyes are an important indicator of something unusual or potentially dangerous. There are a couple of enemies who have distinctive red eyes, and there is a carp in the Mibu Village waters with red eyes as well. However, carp with only red eyes cannot become masters. Though they're considered incomplete creatures that lack the ideal number of scales, their eyes are said to be everlasting. This is quite an interesting detail because it implies here that despite transforming into a fish, the pot noble will never grow into a great carp. The great carp is repeatedly referred to as being a master, so despite all that effort and begging and plotting, they will never achieve immortal fat carp status, forced to live as just a fish, which kind of serves them right. But back to red eyes. The last line of the description also notes that the researcher Dojin in the abandoned dungeon wants these eyes to improve his procedure. Dojin is a shifty surgeon working under his master and head doctor, Dosaku. He requests you bring a test subject who is tough enough to endure his experiment. Your options are either Kotaro or Jinzaimon, sadly 2 naive individuals who you can lure to the abandoned dungeon. The outcome for either is the same: to be subjected to medical treatment using the Rejuvenating Waters. The Rejuvenating Waters, and specifically the word rejuvenation, are something you hear quite a few times across the game, most significantly in Senpou Temple. Inhabited by scoundrel monks who have forsaken their ways and were instead seized by an obsession for the Undying, which corrupted their teachings and style. You may be catching on to a repeating theme in this game. You see evidence of this with these old, decaying monks who cannot be killed, insects crawling out from inside them, keeping them alive. This is immortality at a price. And this is what I was referring to earlier with the centipede theory. I've seen people theorize that these green things in the water are centipedes or centipede larvae, of which the inhabitants have unknowingly absorbed into their bodies, thereby becoming infested, which is supported by the centipedes you see inside the corrupted monk and the guardian ape. The corrupted monk is near the Fountainhead Palace, the ape in the Sunken Valley. Both these places are directly connected and may have this alleged contaminated water, which they may have drunk from. Anyway, when you first enter the temple grounds, you hear a disembodied voice warning you that should you be captured by the monks here, there is no telling what might become of you. There is also this dead-end area, where there are many, many bodies face down on the ground with their hands tied behind their backs. Something very sinister has taken place on what was once holy grounds. Senpou Temple is also where you first meet Kotaro. He's disorientated and confused about where everyone has gone. Well, who is everyone? After some time he reveals that there were once many children here, specifically children of Rejuvenating Waters. And you eventually meet the source of the disembodied voice, the divine child of rejuvenation. However, as she reveals, she is the only one who survived the process. All the other children died as a result of the whims of those who would stop at nothing to create, mimic, or achieve immortality. This immortality was artificially created by man. We don't really know the exact process by which the monks achieved this with the divine child, but they somehow synthesized false dragon blood using the titular rejuvenating waters, but not without many failures beforehand. It's not clear if part of those failures was through infestation. It appears to be a pretty horrible way to be kept alive, bugs crawling inside you. I can't help but think that the amount of infested in Senpou Temple is no mere coincidence. They must have been using centipedes or insects intentionally. I did read some of the Sekiro manga, which focuses on Hanbei the Undying. This story was supervised by From Software, so take its canonness with that in mind, but it literally shows a Senpou monk intentionally dropping a centipede onto Hanbei, which supports the claim that they knew what they were doing in order to achieve some level of undying. So maybe the divine child has a centipede inside her? I'm not about to find that out. But there is a monk in the temple who seems pretty regretful about their practices and tells you to bring the child a tome that will explain the reason for her fate. The chapter in question is titled Infested and details someone who has been blessed by the worm for a long time. I mean, worm probably means centipede, ergo they are immortal because of the centipede, therefore the divine child also has a centipede? Or at least research that led to her becoming immortal in some way. Research that involved many child sacrifices. How many are we talking here? Well, at the edge of a cliff on Mount Congo, there is a chillingly serene sight. Hundreds of carved statues are gathered, wearing little red bibs around their wooden necks, and scattered like flowers betwixt them are these red and white pinwheels, with the description, "Everyone is right here." I've seen people theorize that these are to mark the graves of those children who perished as a result of the Senpou monks, and there is a lot of credit to this theory, especially the inclusion of the pinwheels. I did some research and I found a place called Senpou Temple in Japan that has a beautiful garden to signify unborn children. Rows of stone statues that look very similar to the ones in Sekiro, but these are intended to help mourn children who were lost before birth. And as you can see, nearly all of them have pinwheels accompanying them. This may be because it's an appropriate offering to use for a deceased child, or because the turning of the pinwheel represents the cycle of life that is prevalent in Buddhist teachings, something which the Senpou monks violated by wanting to stagnate their life and live immortally. Anyway, this temple's feature isn't entirely unique. Jizo statues are found in cemeteries across the country, with offerings of hats and scarves placed on them for protection. You do get items explicitly referred to as Jizo statues in Sekiro 2, bundled in red and pink cloth to ensure that the little one goes on in peace. Anyway, back to the surgeon's bloody request. Now you have provided a subject, Dosaku writes that he requires one final item. At the bottom of the Mibu Village pond, you will find a Sakura carp. You will know it from its red eyes, which are said to never rot. I require those eyes. We're already familiar with the fish, but the red eyes is definitely the strangest part of his methodology. What is he going to do with them? Well, you will then find your unlucky victim in the dungeon, now with red eyes and thirsty for your blood. This can be quite a difficult fight because remember, the doctor specified he wanted a strong, tough, young, large warrior. He wanted a weapon.
Oh, his eyes faded. Oh. Oh. Oh, God. Oh. A red lump.
This consumable will give you red eyes if you consume it, along with some other effects. And this item is inextricably linked to the red eyes, as both Kotaro and Jinzaimon drop this item after their operation, as well as Dojin, who inevitably becomes a test subject too. So, does the doctor literally take the red carp eyes and shove them into the patient's eye sockets? Kind of like a Sharingan situation? I mean, I'm beginning to think this guy isn't a real doctor. The abandoned dungeon isn't the most sterile of environments to perform surgery in. So what is the correlation between red eyes and red lump? I mean, it kind of looks like a brain. This is your brain on carp eyes. Or is it the mushed remains of the eyes after you defeat their owner? Do you squish them like grapes? Do they melt? I don't know. I mean, the description does say they will not mould nor wither and will likely remain in the stomach after they've been consumed. Immortal lump. There is definitely some link here, as all the other locations where you find red lumps are in places connected to water, carps, or other red-eyed enemies. So it could be that Dosaku associated red eyes with immortality, or at least great power. I mean, that's not the craziest conclusion to come to. The main example is during your fight with Genichiro. In the post-fight cutscene, he rises from the ground in a dark red mist, and you see his eyes glow red. To which Emma comments, "Is this the Rejuvenating Waters?" So perhaps Mr. Doctor saw red eyes and decided to do some scientific research. This is also supported by the Chained Ogre, a towering pink ogre of a man said to have gone red-eyed and run amok before he was long shut away in a forsaken dungeon. This most likely refers to him being lured to the abandoned dungeon after piquing the interest of Dosaku. It's possible that around this time is when the Doctor's reputation started to diminish, as you learn that his students abandoned him, refusing to dirty their own hands, and opting to study under a more reputable cause, Dogen. This was likely prompted by Dosaku's questionable medical ethics and practices, shoving fish eyes into people. But as we know, there is still one loyal disciple, Dojin, who we've been talking to this whole questline. But even he is starting to question Dosaku's motives, pleading with them that he has strayed from the path of medicine and that the rejuvenating waters have bewitched him too. We've seen what happens when people drink the water. But there is one plot twist in all of this. You never see Dosaku. When the two are discussing behind the bars of the locked chamber, it's kind of hard to see what was going on, and at the time I assumed that the doctor was just slightly off screen. But if you actually go around into the chamber from the back, you discover that Dojin is alone. He's talking to himself. On the table there is a note with instructions for him. Even if I die, the research must continue. Finish the procedure for Ashina's sake.
For Ashina's sake. Don't drink the sake. Oh, sake.
Dojin has been trying to continue his master's research, and for some time, as this message is described as being old. So these conversations that we've heard are either Dojin hallucinating the doctor is there with him, or adopting some kind of split personality. He does say at one point, "Master, why won't you answer me?" which are his last words, as he's left with no choice but to finish the final part of the procedure. You will not only find him with red eyes, but Dojin, also with red eyes, joins the fight. So all of this is to say that Dojin may have been drinking the rejuvenating waters, ergo losing his mind. What I'm not sure of is, if you drink the rejuvenating waters, you don't always get red eyes. Not all enemies have them, which begs the question, is all of the water in this world contaminated? And if so, to what extent? Personally, I think it is to some degree, as the Ministry feared Ashina, her eyes bloodshot with the waters of rejuvenation. Ashina as a territory is said to have a widespread issue with its undying and powerful people. That's why it's a threat. But as I said, not everyone appears to be affected. Some people don't come back to life. Some people don't have red eyes. But they must have been consuming the water to stay alive, so perhaps it's based on how much people have drunk and what kind of water they've drunk too. It's pretty explicitly confirmed that the reason for this undying state is due to the rejuvenating waters. According to a conversation between Kuro and Emma, they call it Ashina's secret weapon, those who are unable to die at all. I'll go into why and the source of this in a second, but Emma also clarifies with you that in the case of Genichiro, he most likely drank a particularly concentrated part of the rejuvenating waters, which she refers to as rejuvenating sediment. It grants great resilience to one's flesh to withstand blows that would be fatal to anyone else. This is important because it clarifies that Genichiro wasn't resurrected. We just weren't actually able to kill him in the first place. It kind of looked like we did, and it looked like he came back to life. I think what Emma's trying to say here is that we gave what would have been a fatal blow to a normal person, but because Genichiro drank this rich water, he was able to survive. Now, I will say this is confusing, especially as Wolf says the words resurrection during the scene, which kind of made me think he was referring to Genichiro resurrecting. I'm not going to blame localization here for anything, but it does seem to be a common cause for confusion. But this would explain why Genichiro is after Kuro's dragon blood. That's what you're trying to stop this whole game. He wants the immortality it grants. Because if he already was immortal and able to resurrect like we are, what does he want Kuro for? Anyway, the relevance of sediment is that sediment is enriched with particles of various materials that would have otherwise have been diluted as it flows downstream. This implies that Genichiro drank from a concentrated part of the water system closer to the source, or at least the point where the sediment was produced. Most other people have been getting what has already been diluted. That's why they don't have the same benefits that Genichiro has. So let's finally address what's been affecting the water. Kuro confirms with Emma that dragon's blood is the source and cause of the rejuvenating waters. And what dragon, you may ask? Well, the ginormous and elegant sight you witness when you reach the top of the Fountainhead Palace and rise above the clouds. The divine dragon does not fly per se, it's actually tethered to the great sakura tree known as the Everblossom. It's hard to tell where the dragon ends and the tree begins. The two are so entwined in each other, existing symbiotically. The dragon is able to control the tree's branches and roots, and it looks like it has pink petals for teeth. But let's focus on how this affects the water. You see, the divine dragon actually came from the west long ago. It wasn't always here. It was attracted to the land of Ashina, what lay below its exceedingly old surface. Water coursing through her ancient rocks and soil. This allowed the dragon to take root. By definition, this means the dragon planted itself in the earth and began to grow, drawing nourishment from Ashina. Presumably, as it latched on, its blood mixed with the water, contaminating the source. Now, what I will say I'm not sure about is if the Everblossom existed before the dragon, because the way this reads, it sounds like a seed being planted in the earth as opposed to the dragon attaching to what was already there. We know they exist somewhat harmoniously in the current day, supported by the reasons I've said before, and also the fact that the divine dragon is suspiciously missing an arm. And one of the quests you're on is to retrieve the aromatic flower or branch which was taken from the divine realm, aka grafting wood from the Everblossom, aka cutting off the dragon's arm. I don't know if it matters too much which came first. A lot of fantasy derives from a big tree controlling the world, but I think that because the Everblossom and its sakura are at the top of the fountainhead, the dragon's blood is responsible for spiking the waters of Ashina with that rejuvenating effect, for better, but probably for worse. I don't think the divine dragon is an evil being. I think for self-preservation reasons, it was looking for a home to settle in, and Ashina seemed like a perfect candidate. But as a result, it drove the inhabitants mad, halted the growth of crops, and rendered the life-sustaining resource of water a curse to never die. Undying begets stagnation, the immortal oath, the rejuvenating waters, the dragon rot. They all corrupt men to the point they no longer live as men. Sever the chains of stagnation. Do not drink the water.